Good day, beautiful people. My name is Janine Cris Pirosete. I am the second reporter who are going to discuss the psychoanalytic therapy. And my assigned topic is the principles of psychoanalytic therapy and the psychoanalytic conceptual tools. The general topic outline has been mentioned by the first reporter, but this is the subtopics under my topic. So, principles of psychoanalytic therapy, affects and expression of emotions, study avoidance, recurring themes and patterns, past experience, interpersonal relationship, therapy relationship, fantasy relationship, and then the second topic is the psychoanalytic conceptual tools. First, we're going to discuss the defense mechanism, then free association, dream analysis, and transference. So at the end of this discussion, we are intended to learn the following. First is to recognize and comprehend the different principles that supervise psychoanalytic therapy. Second is to analyze and comprehend the various conceptual tools used in psychoanalytic therapy. There are seven, as mentioned, seven principles in psychoanalytic therapy. So these principles are mentioned already kanina, the affect and expression of emotions, study avoidance, or the avoidance the client express, the recurring themes and patterns, the past experiences of the client, the interpersonal relationship that the client has been has in his or her circle, the therapy relationship, the relationship of the client in the therapist, and the fantasy life or the dreams, the wishes of the client. So first again is the affect and expression of emotion. So it is the surface manifestation of something that is wrong. So what is wrong? That is wrong is the way to understand the conflicts or issues of what is going on psychologically as arising in. So these affect and expression of emotions can be a physical symptoms like sickness or what sakit-sakit sa katawan, ganyan. This physical sickness can be indication of a psychological illness na nararamdaman ng isang kliyente. So if a person in the therapy, if may mapapansin ka na this expression is parang unusual siya and this can be rooted, these physical symptoms can be rooted from a psychological issues ng client. So, yes. So, as a therapist, dapat i-observe yung expression of emotion, how the patient express emotion during the session. The second is to study the avoidance the client has been showing. So, the avoidance and the resistance. So, avoidance is the act of turning away from an object or an issue, ganon. And then the resistance naman is the ano, the 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 stopping or the act of resisting something na ipalabas or something na i-express. Yan. Resistance, parang you are putting a barrier to express something. So, the person in this stage or in this study avoidance is the person building a wall. So, that wall, to study that wall, how long and how thick is the wall? Then, gaano na ba siya kakapal? Kailan ba siya nag-start na ma-experience niya tong avoidance na to? Kung gaano na ba ka tagal niya na ginagawa itong pag-avoid nito. So, this kind of avoidance can be this defense mechanism kung saan ginagawa niyang protection yung defense mechanism para para i-protect yung sarili niya from the anxiety. If that situation or if that issue is causing the client too much anxiety, then um, the client must be doing this or must be using this defense mechanism to protect the self. So, when an idea or object is discussed or mentioned in the client, try client is trying to avoid talking or participating, maybe the idea presented is part of the conflict, which interfere the person's life. So this includes yung defense mechanism nga ni Freud's defense mechanism like denial or like the introjection or the projection or kaya displacement kung saan ginapalitan niya yung emotion na yon or gina-interject niya sa iba or ay gina-project niya sa iba na tao or ibang objects. So, the exhibition of defense mechanism and resistance that are deliberately or inadvertently applied to avoid undesired feelings. Third principle, it is the recurring themes and patterns. So, persons' lives and internal experiences are filled of recurring patterns. So, these patterns can be the client's lifestyle, the client's way of living, like that. So to understand uh, the person understand the client systematically. So to locate the problematic content of the client. So to understand the client, we must observe, the therapist must observe how this client behave or how this client handle the situation or the stressful situation in his or in her life. So the pattern of how the person live, the way the client responds, behave, or maybe in the sense of his or her story. So by interpreting the themes and patterns of the client's life, which it would help guide the client to recognize and understand the self. So by the by the therapist understanding the recurring themes and patterns, um, and then discussing it to the client, then the therapist is helping the client realigning the stories or understanding the themes of the clients itself. The fourth is the past experiences. So early experiences that could be related to present problems. So maybe there are early experiences the client has been experienced is related to the present situation of the client. So the past helps the light shed on and understand the present. So by understanding the early experiences of the child or of the client, the therapist is helping the client understanding the present situation that the client has dealing. So the goal is to free the person from the bond of the past experiences. So by understanding the relatedness of the early experiences and the present situation, um, the therapist is helping the client to free from the bond kung saan nag-connect yung dalawang recurring events. So these so by helping the client, doon na nag-arise yung acceptance of the early experiences na pwede na siyang i-cut in these present times. So for the fifth principle is the interpersonal relationship. So our psychological being is formed and shaped by the context of relationship, and it lays out in the context of relationship. So this interpersonal relationship includes our parents, our siblings, our family, our neighbors. So uh, of course, hindi naman tayo nabuhay na tayo lang mag-isa, hindi tayo na lang gumawa ng tayo hindi pwede na tayo yung gumawa na magpaano sa atin, magpa-breastfeed yung ganon. So we are born to be part of one another, or we are born to be take care of and to take care of other things, parang ganon. So this interpersonal relationship connect us to one another. So the problem is connected to the relational context. So the problem may arise if uh, the attachment is not satisfied, or if there is a parang conflict in fulfilling those attachments. So maybe nung early child pa yung client is that merong hindi pagkakaintindihan sa pamilya, and then nang hindi, tapos hindi siya na resolve throughout the process hanggang sa nakarating siya in this um late 30s, and then nahihirapan siya to deal with other persons, or to build a relationship with other people. So the issue of objects or attachment relationship which are unsatisfying, traumatic, and not meeting emotional needs to rise in the presentation, interaction, or relationship. So yes. So the sixth principle is the principle between the client and the therapist. So the relationship between the client and the therapist serve as the window to the person's personal relationship. So transference provide an opportunity to explore and analyze the client's interpersonal themes. So yes, so transference is used in the psychoanalytic therapy for the client to freely give, to freely freely ipakita, or freely show yung true self niya na that is related to the past. So that is transference, the attraction or maybe the bond na the client think meron dun sa therapist. And then the counter transference, on the other hand, serve as the gateway of the therapist to fall in resolving his or her own issue. So as the client can connect bond to the therapist also can connect the situation to the can connect her or his past experience to the client. So this is called counter transference, kung saan the therapist um, can think or can believe that these clients is playing an important role in the past life niya na hindi niya nagawa noon. So, yes. So, the seventh principle is the fantasy life. So, these fantasy lives could be daydreaming, night dreams, and absolutely anything in the realm of the life of the mind. So, and this fantasy life dapat is that the therapist is willing to explore this fantasy life, and for discussion. So also dapat i-encourage niya yung client na to cooperate in this session. To yeah. So the clients are encouraged to speak freely and engage in free association, which are great source of wealthy information from thoughts, desires, fears, fantasies, dreams, and hopes. So, which presents their view of themselves, others, and world, as well as aspect of parental avoidance and their interpretation of reality. So, during the session, the therapist must also um, take point dun sa mga fantasy fantasy desires or wishes or unconscious wishes ng client niya during the session. So these principles can be can be analyzed or can be taken care of by these conceptual tools na madidiscuss natin later on. Here are the psychoanalytic conceptual tools. So we first discuss the defense mechanism, and second, we are going to elaborate free association, and then the dream analysis and the transference. So defense mechanism number one is the repression. So according to Freud, the essence of repression lies simply in turning something away and keeping it at a distance from the consciousness. So the most basic defense mechanism is this repression. So when the ego is threatened by undesirable impulses, it protects itself by repressing those impulses. So repression, you are parang you are forgetting or keeping distance from those stressing impulses. So for example, a sexual impotency in a man troubled by sexual guilt. So yung man daw is that having sexual impotency, parang walang kakayahan. And then, dahil sa pagiging walang kakayahan niya, is nagkakaroon siya ng sexual guilt. So, the impotency prevents the man from having to deal with the guilt and anxiety. So, yun, yung first na example. Since yung man is impotent daw, it prevents him um, to deal with the guilt and anxiety. So the second example is a young girl may permanently repress her hostility for a young sister because her hateful feelings create too much anxiety. So the young girl naman, ginatago niya na lang yung pagiging hostile niya doon or pagiging ayaw niya doon sa kapatid niya kasi yung pakiramdam na galit siya ay pakiramdam na parang galit siya sa kapatid niya is that nagka-cause sa kanya ng too much anxiety. So, repressed drives may also find an outlet in dreams, slips of tongues, or on the other defense mechanism. Second defense mechanism is the displacements. So, the redirection of thoughts, feelings, and impulses from an object that gives rise to anxiety to a safer, more acceptable one more acceptable one. So people redirect their unacceptable urges onto a variety of people or objects so that the original impulse is disguised or concealed. So displacement, common din to siya na defense mechanism na maybe unconsciously na ginagawa ng tao. So an example of this is a woman who is angry as her roommate may displace her anger to her employees, her pet, or to a stuffed animal. So, yung galit ng woman sa roommate niya na maybe unreasonable ganon or may mga nagawa yung roommate niya is displace niya yung anger niya na yon sa employee niya kung saan kung saan maybe reasonable na magalit siya pag nagkamali yung employee niya or sa staff toy niya na kung saan walang masasaktan na iba. Yun. Na hindi naman nasasaktan yung staff toy. So displacement is also involved in dream formation, in which a dreamer's destructive urges toward a parent are placed onto a dog or wolf. So the dream may appear about a dog being hit by a car, might reflect the dreamer's unconscious wish to see the parent destroyed. So, yon ang displacements. Um, uh, the thought or the emotion is being displaced to another object or another person reasonably naman. So, yon. So, the third is the denial. So, the refusal to accept reality and to act as if a painful event did not exist. So, for example, this is pa naman, understandable naman siya, easy to understand, denial. So, for example, a person with terminal illness may deny the imminence of death. So, yun na nga, meron siyang terminal sakit, may stage 5 cancer kung saan malala na. And then, tapos ginadeny niya pa rin um, yung possibility or malaking possibility na hindi siya mamatay. And then, the next defense mechanism is the introjection. So, incorporating positive qualities of another person into their own. So, introjection is, parang you adopt the personality or the values of person na parang gusto mo that you wanted to be, parang ganon. So this defense mechanism is good, good and also a bad thing, ay a bad one. Kasi apply mo na sa kanya, parang gusto mo na lang maging siya, and then nagiging ibang tao ka na. And then, pero pag you are trying to adopt the person's personal, ay values na that is kung naman hindi nakakasakit sa'yo and sa mga taong sa paligid mo, then it is still good. So, for example, a young man introject or adopt the mannerism, values, or lifestyle of a movie star. So, with introjection, the young man minimize the feeling of inferiority and build an inflated sense of self-worth. So, the young man, by interjecting the, the ano, favorite movie star, maybe, na-minimize niya yung feeling ng inferiority and nag-build siya ng self-worth sa sarili niya kung saan wala siya nung hindi niya gina-introject yung mannerism and yung values ng person na yun. So interjection permits adopting characteristics that are valuable and a way to let them see themselves better. In that way, they feel better. So by doing so, they feel better. The next defense mechanism is the rationalization. So the cognitive reframing of one's perception to protect the ego in the face of changing realities. So we excuse and justify a threatening thoughts and action by persuading ourselves that there is a rational explanation for it. Rationalization, parang we are giving meaning or we are parang um gina gina-change natin yung reality niya, parang hindi naman ito yung nangyari. Ay hindi hindi naman ganito siya. Parang, so for example na lang para mas madali. So, a person who is fired from a job may rationalize that the job was not actually good anyway. So, sometimes it is less threatening to blame someone or something else for our failure than blaming ourselves. So, by this, we are protecting our ego and this can be through a reason for us to move forward and to be better again. So the next defense mechanism is the intellectualization. So it is the attempt to gain mastery over the perceived disorderly or potentially overwhelming impulses. So for example, if a person A is rude to person B, so person B may think about the possible reasons for persons A behavior. So, the person A isipin niya kung ano nga ba yung dahilan, kung ano nga ba yung reason, parang nagbibigay siya ng reason sa behavior na to, kung saan niya ba pwedeng i-attribute yung behavior na to. So, yun, intellectualization. And then the next is the compensation. So, a process of psychologically counterbalancing perceived weaknesses by emphasizing strength in other areas. So, developing certain positive traits to mask up the limitation. So, compensation. It is like parang kung mahina ka sa ganito na area, you are trying to parang i-build yung may strength ka, i-build na yun siya for a strengther quality sa area na yun, compensation. And then the next is the fixation. So the permanent attachment of the libido unto the earlier, more primitive stage of development. So when the prospect of taking the next step becomes anxiety-provoking, the ego may resort to the strategy of remaining at the present. So, more comfortably, this present by parang fixation is that gina-allow natin yung past or yung feelings ng past para maging para mag-comfort natin dito sa present. So this fixation make us feel more comfortable psychologically comfortable in psychological stage. So people continually derive pleasure from so for example, people who are continually derive pleasure from eating, smoking, or taking may have an oral fixation. So, on the other hand, those who are obsessed with neatness and orderliness may possess an anal fixation. So, see the I see the ano the the fixation. There is this oral kung saan person na yun, ginagamit niya yung eating niya or may something dun sa past niya saan nagakos sa kanya ay this eating behavior is that nagabigay sa kanya ng comfort. And then, being yan, being neat and being, yes, order, um, nang nagabigay sa kanya ng pleasure para para i-supplement yung anal fixation niya. So, fixation demands more or less permanent defense. Uh, so, after fixation is this regression kung saan it is parang it is temporary, uh, temporary rather than permanent kung saan yung fixation is permanent. So, regression is the act of going back to earlier stage. So during times of stress and anxiety, the person reverts back to earlier stage. So these defense allow the person to feel safe, more secure patterns of behavior, and to invest in more familiar objects. So for example, going home, returning to mother, staying all day in bed. So this staying all day in bed is when a threatening world and a cold day is the cause of anxiety. So yan, regression. The next defense mechanism is the compartmentalization. So, a process of separating parts of the self from awareness of other parts and behaving as if one had separate set of values. So, for example, a manager can think of himself as nurturing and sensitive at home, but a hard-nosed tough guy at work. So, mapasok dito yung salient self kung saan yung prevalent self mo in the situation, parang yun yung nangingibabaw in the situation na yon. And then the next is the projection, the attribution of one's undesired impulses onto another. When an impulse provokes too much anxiety, the ego reduces the anxiety by attributing the impulses to another person. So, yun. Um, Projection is that we attribute maybe the impulse cause of anxiety to an object or to another person. Parang sisisihin natin sila, parang ganun. Or para lang ma-protect yung ego natin. And then the next is the reaction formation, the replacement in consciousness of an anxiety producing impulses or feeling by its opposite. So, for example, a young woman extremely hates her mother, but because societal demands of affection makes her feel too much anxiety, she chooses to try to love her mother, but not genuinely because nga she hates her mother. So the young woman tries to deceive the people around that she loves her mother, but the true nature always reveals kung saan yeah, yung love niya is that reaction formation lang na parang it's the opposite of kung ano yung totoo niya na nararamdaman. And so, those defense mechanisms you mentioned are all maybe negative, more negatives. So, this last defense mechanism is a positive defense mechanism in which it is a defense channeling the unacceptable impulses into more acceptable outlets. Is a positive defense mechanism which is beneficial to the individual and to the society. So, sublimated aim is expressed most obviously in creative cultural accomplishment such as art, music, and literature. So, yon persons or many individual uses this defense um, ginaukol nila ito sa paggawa ng tula, ng kanta, ng pag-arte, or ng dance. Yes. So, yun. So those are some of the defense mechanism um, that is presented or that is conceptualized by Freud. So let's do the conceptual tools that will understand that is connected to the principles. So this first is the free association. So free association is a central technique in psychoanalytic therapy, and it play a key role in the process of maintaining the analytic framework. So the client is encouraged to verbalize whatever comes to mind, no matter how insignificant, trivial, or even unpleasant the idea, thought, or picture may seem. So, in essence, clients flow with any feeling or thoughts by reporting them immediately without censorship. So, this free association is that the therapists encourage the client to say whatever comes to the mind of the client. So may mga ano yan, may i-ask siya na question, ganyan, and then or maybe ano, may mga sabihin siya na word, magtanong-tanong siya na ganito, and then the client is freely to verbalize everything na nasa mind niya. So, free association is based on the premise that no idea is arbitrary and insignificant. That is why parang i-verbalize lahat-lahat or yung una na yung lahat na maglabas sa na mag-pop up sa mind niya as the question or as the clue, as an issue or as a something that is na sinabi ng therapist. So free association is one of the basic tools used to open the doors to unconscious wishes, fantasies, conflicts, and motivations. So a technique that often lead the client to some recollection of past experiences and at times a release of intense feeling that have been blocked. So the therapist look at the blocking or disruption in association as the cues to anxiety arousing materials. The therapist interprets the material and connect the dots of the ideas. So then the therapist guiding the client toward having insight into the underlying dynamic. So as the client speak what is in his or in her mind, the therapists are trying to understand those, try to connect those dots, and then after that, the therapist, talk to the client and make um, they the therapist help the client to understand these things na nabanggit niya or nasabi niya, and then by that the client can have an insight toward understanding yung self niya. So free association is a great source of wealthy information. So from thoughts, desires, fears, fantasies, dreams, and hopes, which present their view of themselves, others, and the world. So as well as aspects of experiential avoidance in their interpretation of reality. Aside from the issues the client nasabi niya to this free association, the therapist could also parang reconnect those information from the other areas of our other aspect of the life of the client. So the therapist uses those materials na makollect niya or ma marinig niya from the client para i-unlock or para to understand kung ano nga ba yung gusto ng client, kung ano nga ba yung lifestyle na pinapakita ng client, kung ano nga ba yung culture, kung saan siya nanggaling, and kung paano nga ba nag-start yung mga issues or conflicts na dinadulog ng client. So, these techniques often leads to some recollection of past experiences and at times a release of intense feelings or the catharsis that have been blocked. So, by saying kung ano yung gusto mong sabihin at that time, after the clue, parang you are, since you are free and there is no judgment at all, since hindi judgmental dito yung therapist na dapat nga talaga na hindi siya judgmental, then, the client can release the intense feeling na nasa sa kanya na gina-repress niya noon pa lang or nung magsimula yung mga bagay na yon. So, the use of pre-association is not useful if the client is resistant. Sino nga resistance? Pag ginablock ng client or parang hindi open yung client to say, or the client is stopping his or herself from saying what is in his or her mind. So, and is reluctant to say what he is or she is thinking. So, an example of this behavior is when the client answers after an excessive long pause. So, yung client is parang nagiging reluctant na siya or nagiging resistance na siya to answer the therapist question. Yon is that pag yung client is that parang nagkaroon na siya ng long pause before extensive or extreme long pause before answering the therapy. So, aside from that resistancy, maybe the client, maybe the therapist uh, parang conclude na the client is starting to understand or starting to comprehend kung ano yung mga nangyayari sa kanya. So, this is a green light for the therapist na the client is understanding the self na. So the client uh, as perceived by the therapist maybe na close na siya to some important repressed ideas in his or her thinking. So this indicate that this strong clue for the na yung resistance niya and reluctance niya to answer the question is a strong clue for the therapist to conclude that maybe they are close to the unconscious problem the client is dealing on. So maybe the answer to the question is that para ano na siya na yung root na yun na dahan-dahang nauukay. So that is for the free association. The dream analysis. So Freud conceptualized that dream analysis is the royal road to unconsciousness. So dream analysis is an important procedure for uncovering unconscious material and giving the client insight into some areas of unresolved problems. So dream analysis is a major technique that was used by Freud to unravel the secret of his patient's unconsciousness. So this dream analysis, the task of dream analysis is to analyze and interpret the symbols presented in the manifest content of their dreams. So it is the attempt to discover the latent or hidden meaning. So as mentioned, there is this manifest dream. So what is this? First, this manifest dream and latent dreams are the two levels of dream content. So latent content are those dreams which are hidden, symbolic, and unconscious methods, wishes, and fears. And the manifest contents are the dreams that appears and is remembered by the individual. So the process of converting unconscious dreams or wishes into manifest dreams is described as dream work. So dream work, using dream work, yon na open yung idea dun sa dream na yon, yung materials na yon. So Freud argued that the conscious mind is like a sensor, but it is less vigilant when we are asleep. So Freud argued na yung mind daw is para siyang sensor kung saan gina-check niya every details. Pero pag yung tao daw is nakatulog, naging less vigilant siya kung saan parang hindi siya aware sa mga unconscious, hindi siya aware sa mga bagay na nangyayari sa kanya. Kasi yung person is at rest and parang no activities at all, parang gano'n. parang at rest, parang on the process of resting, of producing and reconnecting and being true sa sarili niya, parang ganon. So, during sleep defenses are lowered and repressed feelings surface. So, yung defense is parang nagababa siya and hindi siya visible. And repressed feelings are surface. Parang nangingibabaw yung mga repressed feelings. Naging totoo nga. Na ilalabas yung mga bagay-bagay. So, thus, one's unconscious wishes, needs, and fears are expressed. Kaya, sa sleep, kadalasan, unconscious wishes, needs, and fears are expressed. Like, sa mga dreams nga, minsan sa mga nakapanigilipan natin. So, some motivations are unacceptable to the person that they are expressed in disguise or symbolic forms rather than being revealed directly. So, there are dreams na kung saan dreams are vivid, kung saan parang yung dream niya is yun talaga yung nangyari noon, ganun na-remember niya. Pero there are also dreams or motivations na uh, objects in the reality, parang represent lang siya ng symbols in the dreams because maybe those dreams or those reality are parang cause too much anxiety or they are parang unacceptable siya to the person, to the client. Ayun. So, the therapist interprets the meaning of dreams elements and these help the client unlock the repression that has kept material from unconsciousness and relate the new insight to their present struggles. So, after unlocking those elements, then i-help ng therapist yung client to understand the meaning of those dreams. So in that, dreams serve as a pathway to repress materials. In addition, it also provides understanding of the client's current functioning. So dream work, as mentioned kanina, there are four aspects of dreams. First is the condensation, displacement, representation, and the symbolism. So let's go first for the condensation. So condensation is one dream object stands for several association or ideas. So for example, an image of a building is in someone's dream might represent a school or also it can represent to be their house. So yan. And maybe uh, a flower represent an old friend or maybe uh, your lover, ganon. So, yun yung condensation. They represent several meanings. They stand for several, parang representation na hindi lang si basta ganito, hindi lang si basta si flower is flower na yung ibig niyang sabihin. Parang ganon. So, displacement naman is that a dream object emotional significance is separated from its real object or content and attached to an entirely different one. Excuse me po. So, displacement, kung yung condensation is that the dream object has several association, displacement naman is parang um, the dream uses other objects to represent parang entirely different object to represent the reality or the wishes of the person. So, for example, um, from the example of the defense mechanism of displacement, a dream about a dog being hit by a car might reflect the dreamer's unconscious wish to see the parents destroyed. So, yon na yung dog pala, yung parents niya, ibig sabihin, and then yung pag-destroyed is yung anything na mag-destroy dun sa parents, ganon. And then, the next aspect is the representation, a thought that is translated into visual images. So, representation, maybe yung mga ideas, yung fears na natatakot siya sa sunog, maybe maging ano siya, ah, siyempre naiisip niya palang natatakot siya sa ganito and then sa dream niya, naglabas doon, nagkaroon ng apoy, ganon. So, yung mga thoughts niya, yung fears niya about anything is nag-visualize niya dun sa mga dreams niya, representation. These thoughts or this idea is repressed by a visual image in the dream. The last aspect is the symbolism. So, a symbol replaces an action, person, or idea. So, yon. Yung thought or yung symbol like flower, maybe it represents a friend nga, or a lover, or yon, or a parent, ganon. Symbol. The dream uses symbol to represent a object or thought to symbolize, or maybe a white dove represent peace, parang ganon. It uses a white dove to represent peace na kung saan gusto nung dreamer na mangyari. So these associations point to the inner conflicts and repressed drives of the client and are analyzed throughout the course of treatment. So this dream analysis, these four aspects of dreams, this dream analysis is used to help the client understand his or herself throughout the process of the sessions or the treatment. Conceptual tool, and the last conceptual tool that is greatly used or greatly big help para sa therapies to understand the client is this transference. So it is the process of attributing one's feeling from one person and to another. So, yun na nga, the process of attributing one's feeling from one person to another. Parang, yun. Yung, maybe the client attribute yung feeling niya or yung anger niya doon sa therapist na nakikita niya as maybe as her father or as her mother or as a kaaway niya. Ganon. Transference, ganon. So, Freud addressed the transferential relationship between analyst and the patient, or the therapist and the patient, was an important curative factor in psychoanalysis. And he made interpreting the transference the counterstone of the theory. So, yon. And he made this transference na yung attachment ng client dun sa therapist is a indication ng good indication or is a way to understand more the client and to help the client. So the therapist serve as the blanco. According to Frank, 1998 yan siya, and maintains a neutral position in the therapeutic relationship. So, means blank screen, parang naging lang siya, the therapist doesn't, parang show anything in her or the therapist self na mag-contribute dun sa or maybe mag-contribute dun sa feeling na maka-affect dun sa client, or maybe hindi siya nag-act as a friend but a neutral blank screen kung saan neutral ng parang walang ginapaboran, parang ganon. And then the therapist here parang hindi siya nag-disclose ng information niya para hindi ma-affect yung feelings or yung development or yung treatment niya dun sa client niya. So, the client transfer. So, in the transference, the client transfer or project the defense mechanism of projection, his or her unconscious feeling onto the therapist. So, parang i-project niya yung anger niya, yung hatred niya dun sa person na galit siya. Kung saan gina-represent or parang maybe nasa katawan ng therapist. Parang ganon. Nag-acting therapist as that person para pag parang as a person kung saan yun yung ginapag-alayan or attributan ng feelings ng client. So, that the client experiencing transference is unconsciously projecting a lost desired figure of a person with the therapist. Yun na nga, the therapist. In this case, the client exert emotions, behavior, and feelings to the therapist, which unconsciously the clients were experiencing. Yun na nga. So, yun. This kind of relationship allows the therapist to help the client release the unconscious issues and drives. Later then, the therapist uses the spoken and observed materials for interpretation and helping the client have insight to how he or she may be feeling and experiencing. So, the ano, yung transference na yun, the materials released or the ideas released or the thoughts released by the client during the transference in the session is magagamit yun siya ng therapist para i-connect yung dots na nasa sa loob ng client. And these dots or this connection will help certainly the client understand yung sarili niya and kung ano nga ba, kung ano yung nangyayari sa kanya. And for the treatment and for the acceptance of the things na nangyayari sa buhay niya. So, transference is often manifested as an erotic attraction. Erotic or maybe love or affection, share ng affection. So, this affection is a positive transference kung saan positive, nag-share lang siya ng love or maybe dun niya ginatukol yung care niya or yung love niya dun sa person na yan, sa therapist. And yan, therapist. But it can also be seen in many forms, such as rage, hatred, or mistrust. Yeah, those are negative transference kung saan yung person attribute hostile behavior toward the therapist. Or anger niya, yung hatred niya nga. Yun, so, ganun. So, it can also be parentification, extreme dependency, or even placing the counselor or the therapist in a godlike or guru status. So yes, it can be a positive transference when yung love is shared, love is showed, or maybe a negative transference kung saan hostile or anger is showed to the therapist. So the goal transference is to expose the unconscious motivation behind the individual's defense mechanism, that projection, that or maybe the repression or yon yung pagtago niya yung or denial or repression or projection. Um, so yun na nga, to expose the unconscious motivation behind the individual's defense mechanism by repeating and reenacting the attitudes, feelings, impulses, and desires that were generated in early life. So, yes, transference help the therapist to understand the client by allowing the client to to make him or her feel that this person na kausap niya is the source or maybe the source of the conflict na nag-arise dun sa client itself. So those are the conceptual tools used in the psychoanalytic therapy. For my references, thank you for listening. Have a good day and more power.